Now, the rapid increase in food prices is seeing crime levels also rising. Now, that's according to the latest survey by the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group. The group says that women have been reporting higher incidents of crime. And for more on this, we are now joined by the group's program coordinator, Mervyn Abrahams. Thank you so much, Mervyn, for joining us this afternoon. Now, when I look at these numbers, it is quite terrifying because food prices in the country continue to climb. And while the monthly price increases do appear to be lowering, it seems like the household basket is still increasing. How exactly is this affecting South Africans, but not just South Africans, more so the more vulnerable people of this country?
So good afternoon, Baron, and good afternoon to all your viewers. Yes, correctly, as you've said, we are seeing that there is beginning to be a moderation around the month-on-month increase of our basket. So, for instance, if we look at the month-on-month increase last month, it was 1.2%. In the month of August, it is 0.6%. So that's about a half of lowering. However, the basket is still quite high. Remember, it is only 44 very basic foods that most South African working class and poor households will purchase. And that basket now stands at 4,775 Rand and 59 cents. And now that is about a 12% increase on last year. It is a 534 Rand and 47 cents increase year on year in Rand terms. And that is having a massive impact on households. Because when we look, for instance, at a national minimum wage, we know that about 50% of South African workers earn at the level of the national minimum wage or less. The national minimum wage is something in the region of 3,800 to 4,000 Rand. And so the cost of this basket of food already outstrips the kind of wage that about 50% of working people in South Africa bring into the household. So we are seeing actually quite a lot of financial stress, because we also have to remember, of course, that taxi fares increased in July, as did electricity at the beginning of July.
And not just taxi fares and electricity, but also, when you look at something like cell phones, prepaid cell phone users, data prices, airtime prices, those things are also very, very high, and we all need means to communicate. But let's talk about how this is affecting women especially, because they are getting the brunt of this.
So it affects women in a number of ways. You had alluded to our statement in which women are saying that crime is also increasing. Let's just unpack that a little bit. We by no means are saying that because you're poor, you commit crime. Of course, there is not that correlation. But what we are seeing in townships is a sense of desperation. And out of that desperation arises incidents of petty crime, opportunistic crime. And that, of course, impacts directly, most of the time, on women. So that is one area. The second area is that women, by and large, have to do the shopping. They have to purchase the food. They tell us that they see inflation firsthand, of course, as the amount in the trolley gets less and less month after month, and yet they still have to feed their children. And so we are finding that women, in order to protect their children from hunger, are spending most of the food on the children, very often eating last, and therefore also, in a sense, carry an extra burden of hunger in order to shield their children. And we see that being confirmed in our health statistics when we are looking, for instance, at non-communicable diseases like high blood pressure, diabetes, etc. Then already we see that that is a major cause of death amongst Black African women in South Africa. And those diseases are the result of long-term undernutrition. So these are all impacts on women. And in this month of August, we would like to draw attention to the fact that poverty and inequality and hunger is another form of violence that is being perpetrated against the women of our country.
Let's talk about, some of those, to take it back to the food especially, because I'm looking at these numbers here. What are some of those food items that the prices have gone up drastically?
So when we look at, for instance, let me give, when we look at, for instance, a 30 kg of maize meal, then we've seen it's increased year on year by 23%. Cake flour has increased by 28% year on year. Samp has increased by 18%, and a 5-liter cooking oil has increased by 70% over the past year. And then we have things that have increased by about 11, onions that have increased by 10, chicken that has increased by about 11. And then we look, for instance, to take bread, brown bread, for instance, has increased by 18%. Margarine has increased by 12%. And so it just goes on and on and on. And when you compare these levels of increases to increases in social grants or increases in wages, then you see that these increases far outstrip, for instance. One other example is, if you take a national minimum wage, if a worker pays for transport and electricity, that alone will be 58% of that wage. That will leave something in the region of 1,700 left over thereafter. And from that, they would have to purchase food, they would have to pay rent, and all other kinds of household expenditure. So there are no way in which a household on a national minimum wage would be able to afford our basket of food, which now stands at 4,700.
Now, Mervyn, also, regionally, I think this is also a very different numbers game, because if we take a look at the different provinces, some might be affected more than others.
Yes. So traditionally, we have always seen that food prices in the city of Cape Town tends to be the lowest in the country. Last month, there was this particular spike, but generally it is lower. In Johannesburg and in Durban, we are still seeing fairly high food prices, partly based on the fact that the retail industry is still trying to recover from the July unrest last year and the looting, etc. So, for instance, if we look at Pietermaritzburg, one of the big malls that do bulk sales just opened last week after the July unrest of last year when it was totally destroyed. So we are still seeing that effect in the prices in Johannesburg, as well as prices in the Durban area. So these are the kind of differences. Another difference with regard to Cape Town, for instance, is that a lot of the food that is sold within the city of Cape Town is sourced fairly close to the city of Cape Town. So you do not have such an enormous fuel bill in the transporting of food. While in Durban and Johannesburg, a lot of the food comes from very far places like the Eastern Cape or Limpopo, and covers very, very vast areas, which of course then involves quite a large fuel bill that is added into the price at retail level.
Thank you so much, Mervyn Abrahams. That's unfortunately all we have time for now, from the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group. They're joining us here on eNCA. Doesn't seem like these prices will be dropping anytime soon, so there is a solution that needs to be thought out in order for South Africans to have a better living conditions and to be able to afford food.